I wore the dress. 4 words that changed everything. When Noah Reed's phone lit up with that message on a rain-soaked highway, he had no idea he was about to crash land into a fake marriage, a family war, and a woman who would either destroy him or become the only real thing he'd ever fought for. This is the story of 2 desperate people, one impossible choice, and a wedding that started as a lie but became something neither of them could walk away from. Before we dive in, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let's begin. The windshield wipers fought a losing battle against the storm. Noah Reed's hands were locked at 10 and 2, knuckles white against the steering wheel as sheets of rain hammered down on the highway. The road ahead had dissolved into a blur of asphalt and darkness, the kind of night where smart people stayed home. But Noah wasn't driving because he was smart. He was driving because his phone had buzzed 3 times in the last 20 minutes, and the last message had made his blood run cold. Come pick me up. I wore the dress. He'd read it twice at the last gas station, standing under the fluorescent lights while rain pounded the metal awning above his head. His first thought had been that it was a wrong number. His second thought, the one that made him get back in the truck and punch the accelerator, was that Evelyn Moore didn't send wrong messages. She didn't make mistakes, and she definitely didn't wear dresses unless something had gone catastrophically wrong. 3 weeks ago, they'd been sitting in the cramped back office of Riverside Inn, surrounded by boxes of old ledgers and the smell of wood rot that no amount of lemon polish could mask. Evelyn had been going through the books with the kind of methodical precision that made Noah think of surgeons and bomb techs, people who couldn't afford to miss a single detail. Her dark hair had been pulled back in a neat bun. Her blouse had been crisp and white. Everything about her screamed control. The bank wants a second guarantor, she'd said, not looking up from the spreadsheet. They won't refinance without one. Noah had been replacing a rotted floorboard near the window, and he'd paused mid-hammer. What about your family? Dead or useless? She'd said it without emotion, the way someone might comment on the weather. My stepbrother inherited the money. I inherited the debt and a building that's falling apart faster than I can fix it. He'd wanted to say something comforting, but comfort wasn't what Evelyn needed. So instead, he'd made a joke. The kind of dark humor that people use when the situation is so bleak that laughing is the only alternative to screaming. Hell, I'll marry you if that's what the bank needs. She'd looked up then, one eyebrow raised, and for just a moment there'd been a flash of something in her eyes. Amusement, maybe. Or desperation wearing an amusement mask. Don't make promises you can't keep, Noah Reed. They'd both laughed. It had been a good moment in a string of bad days. And then Noah had gone back to hammering, and Evelyn had gone back to her spreadsheets, and neither of them had mentioned it again. Until tonight. The GPS said he was 12 minutes out from the Whitmore estate, which was where Evelyn had said she'd be. Noah had never been there, but he knew the reputation, old money, old families, old grudges that went back generations. The kind of place where people got married to merge assets, not because they loved each other. The kind of place where a woman like Evelyn Moore, who'd clawed her way up from nothing after her mother died and her stepfather's family had frozen her out, would never quite belong. But she'd been there tonight, in a wedding dress. Noah's jaw clenched. He pressed harder on the accelerator. The rain was coming down so hard now that the road had turned into a river. His truck plowed through standing water, sending spray up on both sides. The wipers were useless. He was navigating by muscle memory and prayer, following the faint glow of reflectors on the shoulder. His phone buzzed again. Noah grabbed it without taking his eyes off the road, holding it up so he could see the screen in his peripheral vision. Hurry. 1 word, no punctuation. Evelyn didn't do urgency. She did calm. She did controlled. She did ice-cold composure even when the world was burning down around her. Hurry meant panic. Noah dropped the phone and floored it. The Whitmore estate appeared out of the storm like something from a Gothic novel, all iron gates and stone pillars and manicured hedges that probably cost more to maintain than Noah made in a year. The main house sat at the end of a long driveway, lit up like a cruise ship, every window blazing with warm light. There were cars everywhere, expensive cars, the kind with names Noah couldn't pronounce, parked in neat rows along the circular drive. But that wasn't where Evelyn was. She was standing at the end of the driveway, just beyond the gate, in the mud and the rain and the dark. And she was wearing a wedding dress. Noah's truck skidded to a stop, headlights cutting through the downpour to illuminate her. The dress was white, or it had been. Now it was splattered with mud up to the knees, the delicate fabric clinging to her legs like it was trying to drag her down into the earth. Her hair, always so carefully controlled, hung loose and wet around her face, and she was holding a champagne bottle. Not a glass. A bottle. She looked up when the headlights hit her, and Noah saw her face. Evelyn Moore didn't cry. He'd worked alongside her for 6 months, through stress and setbacks and near catastrophes, and he'd never seen her shed a single tear. But she was crying now. Not sobbing, that would have been too much loss of control, but tears were streaming down her face, mixing with the rain. Noah threw the truck into park and was out the door before the engine stopped running. "Evelyn, I almost went through with it." Her voice was barely audible over the storm. She was shaking, whether from cold or shock or something else entirely. "I was standing there in front of everyone, and I almost said yes." Noah closed the distance between them, his boots squelching in the mud. Up close, he could see that the dress was expensive, thousands of dollars worth of silk and lace now ruined. There was a tear in the skirt where she must have caught it on something. Her mascara had run, leaving dark tracks down her cheeks. She looked like a ghost, like someone who drowned and then climbed back out of the water. "Who?" Noah asked, though he wasn't sure it mattered. "Richard Whitmore." Evelyn laughed, and it was the saddest sound Noah had ever heard. "His family owns half the county. He's wealthy, respectable, boring as hell, and completely under Calvin's thumb." Calvin. Evelyn's stepbrother. Noah had never met the man, but he'd heard enough stories to know that Calvin Moore was the kind of person who saw other people as chess pieces, useful or obstacles, nothing in between. "Calvin set this up," Noah said. It wasn't a question. "Richard would have signed as my guarantor." Evelyn took a drink straight from the champagne bottle, and Noah noticed for the first time that it was half empty. "All I had to do was marry him and sell Calvin a parcel of land on the eastern edge of the property. Just 20 acres. Nothing important. Except it's where the original inn stood, before the fire, before my great-grandfather rebuilt." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing mascara across her cheek. "It's the only part of the land that has historical protection. Once I sell it, Calvin can petition to have the whole property rezoned, and then he can force a sale." Noah felt something cold settle in his stomach. "He's going to take the inn." "Eventually," Evelyn nodded. "But he'll do it legally, properly. So when I lose everything, it'll be my own fault for signing the papers." The rain was starting to ease, but the damage was done. They were both soaked through, standing in mud that came up past their ankles. In the distance, Noah could hear voices from the main house, people calling for someone, probably Evelyn, probably wondering where the bride had gone. "Come on," Noah said, reaching for her arm. "Let's get you out of here." "Where?" Evelyn's eyes were hollow. "I can't go home. Calvin knows where I live. He's probably already there, waiting to have a very concerned conversation about my mental state." "My place, then." "You live in a one-bedroom apartment above a hardware store. It's warm, it's dry, and your stepbrother doesn't know where it is." Noah gently took the champagne bottle from her hands and set it down in the mud. "Unless you'd rather go back in there and finish what you started?" For a moment, Evelyn just stared at him. Then she looked back at the house, at all those lights and all those people and the life she'd almost traded herself into. When she turned back to Noah, something had shifted in her expression. "Remember what you said?" she asked. 3 weeks ago, in my office." Noah's mouth went dry. "Evelyn, you said you'd marry me if the bank needed it." She stepped closer, and despite the mud and the rain and the ruined dress, there was steel in her spine again. "I need time, Noah. 6 months, maybe less. Just enough to make the gala work, to get the donations, to prove to the bank that the inn is viable. And I need someone Calvin can't buy, or threaten, or manipulate." "You need a fake husband. I need a real husband. Legally real." Evelyn's jaw set. "Calvin's already going to challenge this. He'll say I'm unstable, that I'm making poor decisions. But if I'm married, if I have a partner who's willing to stand up in court and say this was a mutual choice, then he can't touch me. Noah should have said no. Every rational part of his brain was screaming at him to say no. He was a single father with a 9-year-old daughter who stayed with his ex-wife during the week. He had a small contracting business that was barely staying afloat. He had no business getting tangled up in family politics and legal battles, and whatever mess Evelyn was trying to escape. But she'd called him. Out of everyone she could have reached out to, friends, lawyers, her ex-boyfriend who still texted her every few months, she'd called Noah. And she was standing here in the rain, wearing a wedding dress she'd run away in, asking him to save her the only way he could. 3 weeks ago was a joke, Noah said quietly. I know. This isn't a joke. I know. Evelyn met his eyes, and for the first time since he'd known her, she looked truly vulnerable. I'm not asking you to love me, Noah. I'm not even asking you to like me. I'm asking for 6 months of your life, that's all. The voices from the house were getting louder. Someone had spotted the headlights. They didn't have much time. Noah thought about his daughter, Emma, who thought Evelyn was cool because she ran a business and fixed things with her own hands. He thought about the inn, which was one of the last historic buildings in the county that hadn't been turned into a Starbucks or torn down for a parking lot. He thought about Calvin Moore, who he'd never met but already hated on principle. And he thought about Evelyn standing in front of him in a ruined wedding dress, asking for help in the only way she knew how. Get in the truck, Noah said. Evelyn blinked. What? Get in the truck before someone sees us. We'll figure out the rest later. For a moment she didn't move. Then she nodded once, hitched up the muddy skirt of her dress, and ran for the passenger door. Noah was right behind her. Come out. They didn't go to Noah's apartment. Evelyn had been right about one thing. Calvin would definitely check there. And if Noah's truck was spotted in the area, it would raise questions that neither of them wanted to answer. So instead, Noah drove them to the only place he could think of where they'd be safe for the night, Mike's house. Mike Patterson had been Noah's best friend since high school. They'd played football together, gotten drunk together, and when Noah's marriage had fallen apart 2 years ago, Mike had been the one to show up with a six-pack and a willingness to just sit in silence. Mike didn't ask questions he didn't need answers to. And more importantly, Mike owed Noah about 6 different favors from various misadventures over the years. It was time to cash in. Mike answered the door in sweatpants and a t-shirt that said, I'm not arguing, I'm just explaining why I'm right. He took one look at Noah, then at Evelyn in her wedding dress, then back at Noah. Is this a hostage situation? Mike asked. Kind of, Noah said. Cool, come in. That was the thing about Mike. He rolled with whatever chaos landed on his doorstep. 5 minutes later, Evelyn was wrapped in a blanket on Mike's couch, holding a mug of coffee that was probably 50% whiskey. Noah was in the kitchen with Mike, keeping his voice low. She ran away from her wedding, Noah explained, to a guy her stepbrother set her up with. It was a setup to force her to sell part of her land. Mike whistled low. That's some soap opera shit. Yeah, well, it gets better. She wants me to marry her instead. Mike's eyebrows shot up. Like, for real marry her. Legally marry her, to buy time and keep her stepbrother from forcing a sale. And you said... Noah ran a hand through his wet hair. I haven't said anything yet. I drove her here so she could get warm and think clearly. But you're considering it. Mike leaned against the counter, studying Noah's face. I can see it on you, man. You're actually thinking about doing this. It's insane. Completely insane, Mike agreed, which is why I know you're going to do it anyway. Noah glared at him. What's that supposed to mean? It means you've had a thing for Evelyn Moore since the day she hired you to work on her inn. Mike held up a hand when Noah started to protest. Don't even try to deny it. I've seen the way you talk about her. She's smart, she's tough, she doesn't take anyone's crap, and she runs her own business. She's basically your dream woman. She's also my employer. Not if you marry her, then she's your wife. Mike grinned. Hell of a promotion. Noah wanted to argue, but he couldn't, because Mike was right. Noah had been attracted to Evelyn from the moment she'd opened the door of Riverside Inn and started rattling off a list of everything that needed to be fixed. She was sharp and competent and completely uninterested in being rescued, which was refreshing after his ex-wife had spent their entire marriage acting like Noah was supposed to solve all her problems. But attraction wasn't enough to build a fake marriage on. especially when the fake marriage came with legal complications and a hostile stepbrother and the very real possibility of everything blowing up in their faces. "I need to talk to her," Noah said. Mike nodded. "I'll give you two some space. I've got that guest room upstairs if she needs a place to crash." "Thanks, man." "Don't thank me yet. If this goes sideways, you're buying me a very expensive bottle of scotch." Noah returned to the living room to find Evelyn still on the couch, but she'd stopped shaking. The coffee mug was empty, and she was staring at the wall with the kind of thousand-yard stare that came from making and unmaking major life decisions in the span of a few hours. "How are you feeling?" Noah asked, sitting down in the chair across from her. "Like I just burned my entire life to the ground." Evelyn's laugh was hollow. "Richard's family is going to be furious. Calvin's going to use this as ammunition to prove I'm unstable, and the bank is going to call my loan the second they hear what happened tonight." "So why'd you run?" "Because I looked at Richard standing there at the altar, and I realized I'd rather lose everything than spend the rest of my life married to someone Calvin picked for me." She finally looked at Noah, and her eyes were clear now. Tired, but clear. "I've spent years fighting to keep that inn alive. It's all I have left of my mother. And I was about to sell it out anyway, just in a different way." Noah understood that. After his divorce, he'd sold his house, the one he'd bought with his ex, the one where they'd brought Emma home from the hospital, because staying there felt like living in a museum of his own failure. Sometimes cutting your losses was the only way to survive. "Tell me about the bank," Noah said. "What exactly do they need?" Evelyn set down her coffee mug and leaned forward, switching into business mode. Even in a ruined wedding dress, she was all focus. "The inn is mortgaged. My stepfather took out loans against it before he died, and when I inherited the debt. I've been making payments, but barely. The building needs major repairs, foundation work, electrical, plumbing, the whole 9 yards. I've been doing what I can with the money I make from events, but it's not enough." "And the bank wants a second guarantor before they'll refinance?" "They want proof that someone other than me believes the inn is a viable business. A partner. Someone with assets and credit who's willing to put their name on the line." Evelyn's mouth twisted. "Richard would have done it. His family has money to burn. But it would have cost me that land and eventually the whole inn." "What about me?" Noah asked. "I don't have the kind of money Richard has. I'm not going to impress any bank." "You own your business outright. No debt. And you've got property, the land your parents left you upstate." Evelyn had done her homework. Of course she had. "It's not a fortune, but it's enough to show the bank that you're financially stable. Combined with my assets, we'd qualify for refinancing. But only if we're married." "Only if we're married," Evelyn confirmed. "The bank wants a partnership, legal and binding. They're old-fashioned that way." Noah sat back and let that sink in. She was asking him to tie his financial future to hers. If the inn failed, they'd both go down. And if Calvin decided to make trouble, which he definitely would, Noah would be right in the line of fire. "What about Emma?" Noah asked. "My daughter. She's 9. I've got her every weekend and some holidays. If we do this, she's going to have questions." "I like Emma," Evelyn said, and it sounded genuine. "She's smart and funny, and she doesn't let anyone push her around. Reminds me of myself at that age." "That doesn't answer my question." "I'm not asking to be your stepmother, Noah. I'm asking to be your legal spouse for 6 months, maybe less. Emma doesn't even have to know." Evelyn paused. "But if she does find out, I'll be honest with her. Kids are smarter than adults give them credit for. She'll understand if we explain it right." Noah doubted that, but he appreciated that Evelyn wasn't trying to sugarcoat things. His ex-wife, Jennifer, was going to lose her mind when she found out. She was already convinced that Noah made impulsive decisions without thinking them through. This would just confirm every bad opinion she'd ever had of him. But then again, Jennifer had cheated on him with her yoga instructor and then tried to take the house in the divorce, so her opinions weren't exactly high on Noah's priority list. 6 months, Noah said. "And then what?" "Then we divorce. Quietly. Amicably. I'll make sure you're protected legally. Prenup, postnup, whatever you need. You won't lose anything." Evelyn's voice was steady. "I'm not trying to trap you, Noah. I'm trying to survive." "And if your stepbrother challenges the marriage?" "Then we prove it's real. We live together. We're seen together in public. We make it look legitimate." Evelyn met his eyes. I won't ask you to sleep with me or pretend to be in love. But I need you to stand next to me and not flinch when Calvin tries to tear us apart. Because he will try. Noah knew she was right. From everything he'd heard about Calvin Moore, the man was a predator. He saw weakness and exploited it. And right now, Evelyn was vulnerable, which meant Noah would be too, the moment he said yes. But she'd called him. In her worst moment, when she could have called anyone, she'd called Noah. That had to mean something. Okay, Noah said. Evelyn blinked. Okay? Okay, I'll do it. But we do this right. No half measures. If we're going to convince people this is real, we need to commit. Noah leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. That means we get married at the courthouse as soon as possible. That means we tell the bank immediately. And that means we figure out a story that doesn't sound like we came up with it in a panic at midnight. A slow smile spread across Evelyn's face, the first real smile Noah had seen from her all night. You're serious. I'm insane, Noah corrected. But yeah, I'm serious. Evelyn stood up, still wrapped in Mike's blanket, and crossed the room. For a moment, Noah thought she might hug him. Instead, she held out her hand. Partners, she said. Noah took her hand and shook it. Partners. Neither of them let go right away. They got married on a Tuesday. The courthouse was nearly empty, just a board clerk and a handful of people waiting for other appointments. Noah had taken the day off work, telling his crew he had a family emergency, which wasn't technically a lie. This was definitely an emergency, and Evelyn was about to be family. She showed up in jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. No white dress this time. No makeup. She looked like herself, tired and determined and ready to fight. Mike was there too, because they needed a witness, and because Mike had insisted. I'm not missing this, he'd said when Noah called him that morning. This is either going to be the best decision you ever made or the worst, and either way, I want to be able to say I was there. The ceremony took 7 minutes. The clerk, a woman in her 50s with reading glasses on a chain, barely looked up from her paperwork as she went through the standard legal language. Do you, Noah Reed, take this woman? Do you, Evelyn Moore, take this man? Noah said, I do, and meant it, at least for the next 6 months. Evelyn hesitated, just for a second, so brief that anyone else might have missed it, and then said, I do, in a voice that was steady and clear. The clerk stamped the papers. Congratulations, you're married. Next. That was it. No kiss, no throwing of rice, no celebration, just paperwork and a legal bond that would either save them or destroy them. They walked out into the hallway, and Evelyn stared down at the marriage certificate in her hands like she couldn't quite believe it was real. Well, she said, that's done. Yeah. Noah felt strange, like he'd just signed a contract he hadn't fully read, which technically he had. What now? Now we go to the bank. Evelyn folded the certificate carefully and tucked it into her purse. They open in an hour. We should get there early. Mike clapped Noah on the shoulder. I'm going to head out, unless you need me to come intimidate some bankers. I think we've got it, Noah said. All right, but seriously, man, call me if this goes sideways. I've got a lawyer friend who owes me a favor. Mike looked at Evelyn. And congratulations, I guess? Welcome to the family, such as it is. Evelyn actually smiled. Thanks, Mike. After Mike left, Noah and Evelyn stood in the courthouse hallway, both of them trying to process what they'd just done. Around them, people moved with purpose. Lawyers in suits, families huddled together, clerks carrying stacks of files. Normal people doing normal things. Noah and Evelyn had just gotten married to commit fraud, or to prevent fraud. He wasn't entirely sure which. Are you okay? Evelyn asked. Ask me again in 6 months, Noah said. Then, because humor was his default defense mechanism. So, do I get to call you Mrs. Reed now? Absolutely not, but she was still smiling. I'm keeping my name. It's on all the ends paperwork. Fair enough? They walked out to the parking lot together, and Noah realized they hadn't discussed logistics. Where were they going to live? What were they going to tell people? How were they going to make this look real enough to fool Calvin and the bank and everyone else who would definitely have opinions about this sudden marriage? But before he could ask any of those questions, Evelyn's phone rang. She looked at the screen and went pale. "Calvin," she said. Noah's jaw tightened. "Don't answer it." "I have to. If I don't, he'll just show up at the inn." Evelyn took a breath and answered the call, putting it on speaker. "Hello, Calvin." The voice that came through was smooth and cultured, the kind of voice that belonged to someone who'd never had to fight for anything in his life. "Evelyn, I heard you had quite the dramatic exit last night. Poor Richard was devastated." "I'm sure he'll recover," Evelyn said coolly. "Perhaps. But I'm more concerned about you, dear sister. Running away from your own wedding? That's erratic behavior. Some might say unstable." There was a pause. "I think we should have a conversation about your mental health, about the inn, about what's best for everyone involved." Noah could practically hear the threat underneath the words. Calvin was setting the stage to have Evelyn declared incompetent, to take control of her assets, to do exactly what she'd been afraid he'd do. "I'm fine, Calvin," Evelyn said. "In fact, I've never been better." "Really? Because from where I'm standing, you just sabotaged your only chance at saving that crumbling inn of yours. The bank isn't going to extend your loan without a guarantor, and Richard was your last option." Calvin's voice turned sharp. "Face it, Evelyn, you're out of moves. It's time to sell." Evelyn looked at Noah. He nodded. "Actually," Evelyn said, "I got married this morning." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Excuse me?" Calvin finally said. "I got married to Noah Reed. We just left the courthouse." Evelyn's voice was steady, but Noah could see her hand shaking slightly. "So I do have a guarantor and a partner, and you can take your concern and shove it." Another silence. Then Calvin laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "Noah Reed, the handyman, you married your contractor to spite me?" "I married him because I love him," Evelyn lied smoothly. "Something you wouldn't understand." "Love," Calvin practically spat the word. "You don't believe in love, Evelyn. You believe in control. And this, whatever this is, isn't going to work. I'll challenge it. I'll prove it's a fraud. And when I do, you'll lose everything." "Try it," Evelyn said, and hung up. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Evelyn looked at Noah, and he saw real fear in her eyes for the first time. "He's going to come after us," she said quietly. "I know," Noah said. "He's going to make our lives hell." "Probably." Evelyn took a shaky breath. "I'm sorry. I dragged you into this, and now—" "Hey!" Noah reached out and took her hand, the same hand that had signed the marriage certificate 20 minutes ago. "We're in this together now. Partners, remember? That means when Calvin comes after you, he's coming after me too. And I don't back down from bullies." Evelyn squeezed his hand. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. We still have to convince the bank that this is real." Noah glanced at his watch. "Come on. Let's go save your inn." They got in Noah's truck and drove to the bank, hands still linked across the center console, both of them trying not to think about the war they'd just declared. Behind them, the courthouse stood silent in the morning sun, holding the record of a marriage that would either be the smartest thing they'd ever done or the biggest mistake of their lives. Time would tell. But for now, they had a bank to convince and an enemy to face, and they were doing it together. The bank manager's office smelled like old leather and disappointment. Robert Henshaw had been managing First National Bank for 23 years, and in that time, he'd developed the kind of face that gave nothing away. He sat behind a mahogany desk that probably cost more than Noah's truck, fingers steepled, studying the marriage certificate that Evelyn had just slid across to him like it was evidence in a criminal trial. "This was issued this morning," Henshaw said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Evelyn replied. She sat with her spine straight, chin up, every inch the composed businesswoman Noah had first met 6 months ago. "Noah and I have been together for some time, but we kept it private. Given the circumstances with my loan, we decided to formalize our partnership." Henshaw's eyes flicked to Noah, who was doing his best impression of a supportive husband. He'd worn his one good suit, the one he kept for funerals and court appearances, and he'd even shaved. But sitting in this office, surrounded by diplomas and leather-bound books and the quiet hum of old money, Noah felt like an imposter. "Mr. Reed," Henshaw said, "you're aware that by signing on as a guarantor for Miss Moore's loan,
You'll be legally responsible for the debt if the inn fails? I am, Noah said. And you own Reed Contracting outright? No business debts? None. I bought out my former partner 3 years ago, paid cash. It had cleaned out his savings, but it had been worth it to have full control. Henshaw made a note on his legal pad. And the property in Ulster County? The 47 acres your parents left you? Still mine. No mortgage. Noah kept his voice level, but inside he was reeling. How the hell did Henshaw know about that land? Noah had barely thought about it himself. It was just woods and a falling-down cabin that had belonged to his grandparents.
Evelyn must have seen the question on his face because she touched his knee under the desk. A brief, reassuring pressure. Henshaw leaned back in his chair. I'll be frank with you both. This bank has been very patient with Ms. Moore. We've extended her loan twice already, and each time the improvements to the inn have been minimal at best. The foundation issues alone are going to cost upwards of $200,000. That's not including the electrical work, the plumbing, or the roof repairs. The Christmas Gala will generate significant revenue, Evelyn cut in. I have commitments from 3 major donors, and the Historical Society is sponsoring. The Christmas Gala is 2 months away, Henshaw interrupted. And even if it's successful, it's a one-time event. What this bank needs to see is sustained revenue, a business plan that shows long-term viability. Evelyn's jaw tightened, but she didn't back down. Which is why I'm asking for a refinance, not another extension. With Noah as a partner, we can invest in the repairs properly. We can modernize while maintaining the historical integrity. We can turn the inn into what it was always meant to be. With his land as collateral. With our combined assets, Evelyn corrected. We're married now. What's his is mine, and what's mine is his. Noah tried not to wince at that. They'd been married for less than 2 hours, and already his property was on the table as collateral for a building he wasn't sure could be saved. But he'd known this was coming. Evelyn had been clear about what she needed, and Noah had said yes with his eyes open. Mostly open, anyway. Henshaw studied them both for a long moment. Then he pulled out a file folder and opened it. I'll need to see your financial statements, Mr. Reed. Tax returns for the last 3 years, bank statements, business records. And I'll need a formal business plan from both of you. Not just projections, but concrete steps you're taking to make the inn profitable. How long do we have? Noah asked. 2 weeks. I'll present everything to the loan committee, and they'll make a decision. Henshaw closed the folder. But I'll tell you right now, this is going to be scrutinized. A sudden marriage right before a loan refinance? That raises red flags. Our marriage isn't sudden, Evelyn said coolly. We've been seeing each other for months. Can anyone verify that? Evelyn didn't hesitate. Mike Patterson. He's been covering for us at work sites so we could spend time together without raising suspicion. Noah kept his face neutral, but inside he was impressed. Evelyn was thinking 3 steps ahead, turning their best friend into an alibi. Mike would back them up. He'd practically offered to commit perjury the night Evelyn showed up in her wedding dress. But it was still a hell of a lie to maintain. Henshaw made another note. I'll be in touch. They were dismissed. Outside the bank, the mid-morning sun was too bright, too cheerful for how Noah felt. Evelyn walked quickly to the parking lot, her heels clicking on the pavement, and didn't speak until they were both in Noah's truck with the doors closed. That went better than expected, she said. Noah stared at her. Better? He basically called us liars. He suspects we're liars. That's different. Evelyn pulled out her phone and started typing. He gave us 2 weeks to build a paper trail. That's doable. Evelyn. Noah waited until she looked up at him. He knows about my land. How does he know about my land? I told him. Noah bit back the first 3 responses that came to mind. When exactly were you planning to mention that you'd been discussing my assets with the bank? I needed to know if you had enough collateral to qualify as a guarantor, so I asked. Evelyn's tone was matter-of-fact, like she couldn't understand why Noah was upset. I didn't forge your signature or sell your property. I just confirmed it existed. Without asking me first. I was going to ask you if the marriage happened. It happened. She tilted her head. Are you angry? Noah wanted to be angry. He should be angry. But looking at Evelyn, sitting in his truck in her jeans and sweater, trying to save the only thing she had left of her mother,
He couldn't quite get there. I'm frustrated, he said finally, because you're making decisions that affect both of us without talking to me first. If we're going to do this, if we're going to convince people we're really married, then we need to act like partners. That means communication. Evelyn absorbed that. You're right. I'm sorry. The apology caught Noah off guard. Evelyn didn't apologize often, and when she did, it was never casual. She meant it. Okay, Noah said. So what now? Now we go to the inn and figure out where you're going to live. Evelyn started typing on her phone again. Henshaw's going to check up on us. If you're still living above the hardware store and I'm living at the inn, that's going to look suspicious. Noah hadn't thought about that. You want me to move in with you? I want us to live together like married people do. There are 3 guest rooms on the 2nd floor. You can take whichever one you want. Separate rooms. Of course, separate rooms. Evelyn glanced at him. I told you I wasn't asking you to sleep with me. Right. Noah started the truck. What about Emma? I've got her this weekend. Then bring her. The inn has plenty of space, and she likes exploring old buildings. Evelyn paused. Does she know about the marriage yet? No, I was planning to tell her tomorrow when I pick her up from Jennifer's. Noah pulled out of the parking lot. That's going to be a fun conversation. Do you want me there when you tell her? Noah considered that. Part of him wanted to shield Emma from this whole mess, to keep the divorce recovery fake marriage chaos away from his daughter for as long as possible. But another part of him knew that Emma was smart enough to smell a lie from a mile away. If he and Evelyn were going to sell this marriage to the world, they needed to sell it to Emma first. Yeah, Noah said. Yeah, I think that would help. Evelyn nodded and went back to her phone, already planning their next move. They drove in silence for a while, and Noah found himself thinking about the land Henshaw had mentioned. 47 acres in Ulster County, deep in the Catskills, where his grandparents had built a cabin back in the 70s. Noah's parents had inherited it, used it maybe twice a year for camping trips, and then left it to Noah when they died in a car accident 8 years ago. He'd been meaning to do something with that land, sell it, develop it, at least maintain the cabin, but life had gotten in the way. Marriage, divorce, custody battles, starting his business. The land had just sat there, waiting. Now it was collateral for a marriage he'd entered into less than 3 hours ago. Tell me about the inn, Noah said, breaking the silence. Not the business plan stuff. Tell me why it matters to you. Evelyn looked up from her phone, surprised by the question. For a moment, Noah thought she wasn't going to answer. Then she set the phone down and looked out the window at the passing scenery. My mother worked there when I was a kid, she said quietly. She was a housekeeper. Minimum wage, no benefits, but she loved that building. She used to tell me stories about the people who built it, my great-great-grandparents, and how they'd survived the Depression by turning their home into a place where people could feel safe, feel welcome. Noah had known Evelyn's mother had worked at the inn, but he hadn't known the connection went that deep. When my mom got sick, Evelyn continued, the owners at the time, distant cousins I'd never met, they let her stay in one of the rooms. No charge. And when she died, they left the inn to her in their will. Not to their own kids who'd moved away and didn't care. To my mother. Because she'd loved it more than anyone. But she was already gone. So it came to me. Evelyn's smile was sad. I was 19, in college. I had no idea how to run a business, let alone save a historic building that was already falling apart. But I couldn't sell it. It was the only thing I had left of her. Noah understood that kind of grief, the kind that made you hold on to things you couldn't afford to keep because letting go felt like losing the person all over again. What about your stepfather? Noah asked. Where was he in all this? Dead by then, thank God. Evelyn's voice turned hard. He married my mother when I was 12, swept her off her feet with promises and charm, and then spent the next 6 years draining every penny she had. When she got sick, he took out loans against the inn without telling her, against property that wasn't even his, and when she died, he tried to take it all. But he couldn't. Not legally. The will was airtight, but he had Calvin, his son from a previous marriage, and Calvin's always been good at finding loopholes. Evelyn's jaw tightened. They fought me for 2 years, tried to prove I was an unfit heir, that I'd manipulated my mother, that I didn't deserve the inn. They lost. They lost that battle, but my stepfather had already done the damage. The loans were in the inn's name, and when he died, they became my responsibility. Calvin inherited the family money, his mother's side, all old railroad wealth, and I inherited the debt. He's been waiting for me to fail ever since. Noah's hands tightened on the steering wheel. He'd never met Calvin Moore, but he already wanted to punch the guy in the face. What kind of person spent years trying to destroy their own stepsister? What kind of person saw someone struggling and decided to push harder instead of helping? He's not going to win, Noah said. Evelyn looked at him. You sound very sure of that. Because I am. Calvin spent his whole life using money and lawyers to get what he wants. He's never had to actually fight for anything. But we're not going to play by his rules. Noah glanced at her. We're going to save that in, and we're going to do it in a way that makes him choke on his own smugness. For the first time since the bank, Evelyn smiled. A real smile, not the polite one she wore for clients and loan officers. I think I made the right choice calling you, she said. Ask me again in 6 months, Noah replied, echoing his earlier response. But he was starting to think maybe this wasn't the worst decision he'd ever made. When they arrived at the inn, Noah saw it with fresh eyes. He'd been working on the building for months, but always as a contractor, focused on the immediate problems, the structural issues, the things that needed fixing. Now, looking at it as someone who just put his entire future on the line, he saw what Evelyn saw. Riverside Inn sat on a small rise overlooking the Hudson, a sprawling Victorian structure with gabled windows and a wraparound porch that had been added sometime in the 20s. The paint was peeling, and several of the shutters hung crooked, but underneath the neglect was something beautiful, something worth saving. It's bigger than I remembered, Noah said as they got out of the truck. 15 rooms, not counting the ballroom and the dining hall. Most of them haven't been used in years. Evelyn pulled out her keys. I've been focusing on keeping the main floor functional for events. Everything else is just waiting. They walked up the front steps together, and Noah noticed that one of the boards creaked ominously under his weight. He'd have to fix that, along with about 1,000 other things. Inside, the inn was cold. Evelyn kept the heat off in the unused rooms to save money, which meant that most of the building felt like a museum, beautiful and silent and slowly dying. The guest rooms are this way, Evelyn said, leading him up a wide staircase with an ornate banister. I'm in the master suite at the end of the hall. You can take any of the others. Noah followed her upstairs, his footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors. The hallway was lined with photographs, old pictures of the inn in its glory days when it had been full of guests and life. He paused at one that showed a woman standing on the porch, smiling at the camera. Is that your mother? He asked. Evelyn stopped and looked back. Yeah. That was taken a few months before she died. She was so happy that day. Her voice softened. She thought the inn would always be here, that I'd fill it with people who loved it as much as she did. Noah didn't know what to say to that, so he just stood there with her, looking at the photograph of a woman who'd believed in something beautiful and left her daughter to fight for it alone. Until now. Come on, Evelyn said, breaking the moment. I'll show you the rooms. She was right. There were 3 guest rooms, and all of them were frozen in time. Antique furniture, faded wallpaper, windows that probably hadn't been opened in years. Noah chose the one closest to the stairs, mostly because it had good light and a view of the river. I'll need to bring some stuff from my apartment, he said. Clothes, tools, Emma's things for the weekends. There's plenty of closet space, and the bathroom down the hall works, though the water pressure's terrible. Evelyn leaned against the doorframe. I know this isn't ideal. It's fine. I've lived in worse. Noah looked around the room, trying to imagine actually sleeping here, waking up here, pretending this was his home and not just a strategic position in someone else's war. His phone buzzed. A text from Mike. How'd it go with the bank? Noah typed back. Could have been worse. We have 2 weeks to prove we're legit. Mike's response was immediate. Need help with anything? Might need you to lie to a bank manager about how long we've been dating. Done. I'll start practicing my Oscar speech. Noah smiled despite himself. At least he had Mike in his corner, and Evelyn in her own complicated way. I should get to my apartment and start packing, Noah said, pocketing his phone. Do you need help with anything here before I go? Evelyn hesitated. Actually, there's something I need to tell you about the gala. Noah's stomach sank. What about it? I may have exaggerated how committed those donors are. One of them already pulled out when he heard I ran from the wedding. The Historical Society is still on board, but they're nervous. Evelyn crossed her arms. If we don't make this gala perfect, if we don't raise at least $100,000, then even with the refinance, we're going to be in trouble. $100,000? Noah stared at her. In one night? It's happened before. 3 years ago, we raised $90,000. But that was when the building was in better shape, and I hadn't just publicly humiliated one of the county's wealthiest families. Noah ran a hand through his hair. This just kept getting better. Okay, so we need to make the gala happen, convince the bank we're legitimately married, and somehow avoid whatever hell Calvin's planning to unleash on us. Anything else? The ballroom floor is still unstable. I've been putting off the repairs because I couldn't afford them, but if we're going to host 300 people in there, it needs to be fixed. I can do that. Noah had already been planning to reinforce the floor anyway. It was one of the many projects on his endless list. But it's going to take time. And materials. Do you have the budget for that? Not really, but I'll figure something out. Noah made a decision. I'll cover it. Materials and labor. Consider it a wedding present. Evelyn's eyes widened. Noah, you can't. I just put my land up as collateral for your loan. I think I can spring for some floor joists. He held up a hand before she could argue. We're partners now, remember? That means when you need something, I help. And right now, you need a ballroom floor that won't collapse under the weight of 300 rich people. For a moment, Evelyn just looked at him. Then she nodded. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Thank me when this all works and we're not buried in debt and lawsuits. Deal. Noah headed for the door, then paused. Hey, Evelyn? Yeah? We're going to be okay. I don't know how yet, but we'll figure it out. Evelyn smiled, tired but genuine. I hope you're right. So did Noah. He left the inn and drove back to his apartment, his mind racing with everything that needed to happen in the next 2 weeks. He needed to pack. He needed to gather his financial records for the bank. He needed to tell Emma that he'd gotten married to his employer and they were all going to live in a haunted-looking inn for the foreseeable future. And somehow, he needed to make it all look normal, natural, like this was what he'd wanted all along. When Noah pulled up to his apartment building, Jennifer's car was parked out front. His ex-wife was leaning against her BMW, arms crossed, wearing the expression that meant she'd heard something and she was not happy about it. Noah's first thought was that someone had already told her about the marriage. His second thought was that he was completely screwed. He got out of the truck, bracing for impact. Noah, Jennifer said, her voice tight, we need to talk. About what? About the fact that I heard from Richard Whitmore's mother that you got married this morning, to Evelyn Moore, without telling me, without discussing how this would affect Emma. Jennifer pushed off her car. Were you planning to mention it, or was I just supposed to find out from the country club gossip chain? Noah's jaw clenched. Of course the news had already spread. He and Evelyn had been married for less than 5 hours, and apparently the entire county already knew. I was going to tell you tomorrow when I picked up Emma, Noah said. This all happened fast. How fast? How long have you even been seeing this woman? Jennifer stepped closer, and Noah could see the anger in her eyes. You spent our entire marriage saying you weren't ready for commitment, and now you're married to someone you've known for, what, 6 months? It's complicated. It's insane, Jennifer lowered her voice. Emma is 9 years old, Noah. She's still adjusting to the divorce, and now you're going to spring a stepmother on her? Evelyn's not trying to replace you. That's not the point. The point is that you made a massive life decision without considering how it would affect our daughter. That's exactly the kind of impulsive behavior that destroyed our marriage in the first place. Noah wanted to argue, but he couldn't. Because Jennifer was right. He had made an impulsive decision. He'd said yes to Evelyn without fully thinking through the consequences, and now Emma was going to pay the price for his recklessness. I'm sorry, Noah said quietly. You're right. I should have told you before I did this. But I can't undo it now.
So we need to figure out how to make this work for Emma. Jennifer studied his face. Do you even love her? Evelyn? The question caught Noah off guard. Did he love Evelyn? He barely knew her. Not really.
He knew she was competent and stubborn and fiercely protective of the things she cared about. He knew she made him want to be better, to do more, to fight harder. But love? That was too big a word for what they had. I care about her, Noah said, which was true. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I've got right now. Noah met Jennifer's eyes. Look, I know this looks bad. I know it's sudden and weird and probably the worst timing possible, but I need you to trust that I'm not going to let anything happen to Emma. She's my priority. She always has been. Jennifer sighed. I want to meet her, Evelyn, before Emma spends any significant time with her. Fair enough. And I want us to sit down together, you, me, and Evelyn, and figure out how we're going to explain this to Emma in a way that doesn't make her think marriage is something people do on a whim. Even though that's exactly what Noah had done. But he nodded. Okay, I'll set it up. Jennifer walked back to her car, then paused with her hand on the door. I hope you know what you're doing, Noah, because if this blows up in your face, Emma's the one who's going to get hurt. I know, Noah said. He watched Jennifer drive away, feeling the weight of what he'd done settle even heavier on his shoulders. This wasn't just about him and Evelyn anymore. It was about Emma, about Jennifer, about everyone who would be affected when this fake marriage inevitably fell apart. Noah pulled out his phone and called Evelyn. What's wrong? She answered immediately. Jennifer knows. She wants to meet you before Emma finds out about the marriage. There was a pause. Okay, when? Soon. Tomorrow, maybe. Can you do that? Of course. Evelyn's voice was steady. Noah, are you all right? He wasn't. He was terrified and overwhelmed and starting to wonder if he'd made the biggest mistake of his life, but admitting that wouldn't help anyone. I'm fine, Noah lied. I'll call you later with details. He hung up and went inside his apartment, looking around at the space he'd lived in for the past 2 years. It wasn't much. 1 bedroom, a tiny kitchen, a living room that doubled as Emma's playroom on weekends. But it was his, safe, uncomplicated. In 24 hours, he'd be living at the inn. In 2 weeks, the bank would decide whether his marriage was legitimate enough to save. And somewhere in between, he had to convince his daughter, his ex-wife, and himself that this was all going to work out. Noah started packing. The meeting with Jennifer happened at a coffee shop downtown, neutral territory that wouldn't give anyone the upper hand. Noah arrived early, claimed a corner table, and was halfway through his second cup when Evelyn walked in. She'd dressed carefully, professional but not intimidating, in dark jeans and a navy sweater that made her look approachable. Her hair was down, softening the sharp angles of her face. Noah stood as she approached, and for a moment they both hesitated, unsure of the protocol. Were they supposed to kiss, hug, act like the married couple they technically were? Evelyn solved the problem by squeezing his hand briefly before sitting down across from him. Is she here yet? Evelyn asked, keeping her voice low. Not yet. She's usually 10 minutes late to everything. Noah checked his watch. That gives us about 5 minutes to get our story straight. We met when you started working on the inn 6 months ago. We kept it quiet because you were technically my contractor, and I didn't want people to think I was mixing business with personal matters. We fell in love gradually. Evelyn ticked off the points like she was presenting a business plan. We got married quickly because we realized life was too short to wait, and we wanted to face my financial problems as a team. That's good, Noah said, but maybe tone down the rehearsed part. Jennifer can smell a script from a mile away. Then what do you suggest? Noah thought about it. Tell the truth as much as possible. We did meet 6 months ago. We did keep things professional at first. The marriage was fast, but it wasn't random. We both knew what we were getting into. And if she asks if we love each other? Before Noah could answer, Jennifer walked in. She spotted them immediately, and Noah watched her take in the scene. Him and Evelyn sitting close, hands almost touching on the table, looking like they'd done this 1,000 times before. Jennifer's expression hardened slightly, but she kept her composure as she approached. Jennifer, this is Evelyn, Noah said, standing again. Evelyn, my ex-wife, Jennifer. The two women shook hands, sizing each other up. Jennifer was petite and blonde, yoga instructor fit, wearing designer athleisure that probably cost more than Noah's entire wardrobe. Evelyn was taller, darker, sharp edges, and controlled strength. They were opposites in every way that mattered. "Thank you for meeting with me," Jennifer said as she sat down. "I know this is awkward." "It doesn't have to be," Evelyn replied evenly. "We both care about Emma. That's the important thing." Jennifer ordered a green tea and waited until the server left before speaking again. "I'll be honest. When Noah told me he was getting married, I thought he'd lost his mind. The Noah I knew wasn't impulsive about relationships. He took 2 years to propose to me, and even then I had to practically drag him to the jewelry store." Noah winced, but Evelyn didn't flinch. "People change," Evelyn said, "and sometimes circumstances require decisive action rather than careful deliberation." "Circumstances." Jennifer repeated the word like it tasted bad. "You mean your financial problems with the inn?" "Among other things, yes." "So this is a business arrangement?" It wasn't a question. Evelyn met Jennifer's eyes without hesitation. "This is a marriage, legal and binding. Whether you approve or not doesn't change that fact." The table went silent. Noah could feel the tension crackling between the two women, and he knew he needed to intervene before this turned into a full-scale war. "Jennifer," he said carefully, "I know this seems fast, and I know you have concerns about Emma, but Evelyn and I are in this together. We're building something, and we want Emma to be part of it." "Building what, exactly? A fake marriage to fool a bank?" "Building a partnership," Evelyn cut in. Her voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. "I'm not asking to replace you as Emma's mother. I'm not even asking her to call me anything other than my name. But I'm going to be in Noah's life, which means I'll be in hers too, and I'd prefer we start this relationship with honesty rather than hostility." Jennifer studied Evelyn for a long moment. "You don't strike me as the maternal type." "I'm not. I never wanted children of my own." Evelyn didn't apologize for it. "But Emma is smart and independent, and from what Noah's told me, she's more than capable of deciding for herself whether she likes me. She's 9 years old. I was running my mother's household at 9. Don't underestimate her." Something shifted in Jennifer's expression, not quite approval, but maybe a grudging respect. She looked at Noah. "Does Emma know about the marriage yet?" "No, I wanted to tell her this weekend when I pick her up, with Evelyn there, so she can meet her properly." Noah leaned forward. "I know I screwed this up by not telling you first. I'm sorry for that, but I can't undo it, and I won't apologize for marrying Evelyn. What I can do is make sure Emma's transition into this new situation is as smooth as possible." Jennifer's tea arrived, and she wrapped her hands around the cup like she needed something to hold on to. "I want weekly check-ins about how Emma's adjusting, whether she's comfortable at the inn, if there are any problems." "Done," Noah said immediately. "And if she says she doesn't want to stay there, you don't push her." "Agreed." Jennifer looked at Evelyn. "And you, if Emma asks you questions about the marriage, about why it happened so fast, you tell her the truth. Age-appropriate truth, but truth. No lies." Evelyn nodded. "I can do that." The tension eased slightly. Jennifer took a sip of her tea, then set it down with a sigh. "I still think you're both insane, but if this is really what you want, I'll support it, for Emma's sake." "Thank you," Noah said, meaning it. Jennifer stood to leave, then paused. "One more thing. If this marriage falls apart and Emma gets hurt in the process, I will make your life hell, Noah Reed. Do you understand me?" "Completely." After Jennifer left, Noah and Evelyn sat in silence for a moment. Noah could feel the adrenaline draining out of his system, leaving him exhausted. "That went better than expected," Evelyn said finally. "She threatened to ruin my life." "Yes, but she didn't demand we get an annulment. I call that a win." Evelyn checked her phone. "We should head back to the inn. The contractor I hired for the ballroom floor is supposed to give me an estimate this afternoon." Noah frowned. "I thought I was doing the ballroom floor. You're going to be busy enough with the bank paperwork and moving your things. I can't expect you to do all the heavy lifting." Evelyn started gathering her bag. "Besides, this contractor came highly recommended. He specializes in historic restoration." Something in Noah's gut twisted.
Who recommended him? Calvin, actually. He sent me an email this morning offering to help with the gala preparations. As a peace offering, he said. Noah's hand shot out, catching Evelyn's wrist before she could stand. Do not hire anyone Calvin recommends. It's a trap. What kind of trap? I don't know yet, but think about it. Calvin spent years trying to destroy you, and suddenly he wants to help? He's planning something. Noah's mind was already racing through possibilities. If this contractor screws up the floor, the gala gets canceled. If the gala gets canceled, you can't make your fundraising goal. If you can't make your fundraising goal, the bank calls your loan. Evelyn's eyes widened as she followed the logic. And if the loan gets called, Calvin swoops in with an offer to buy the inn at a fraction of its value. You'd have no choice but to sell. That bastard. Evelyn sank back into her chair. I almost fell for it. Because you're desperate, and he knows it. That's how predators work. They wait until you're vulnerable, then offer help that's actually poison. Noah released her wrist. Let me do the ballroom floor. It'll take me a week, maybe less if I bring in my crew, and you won't have to worry about sabotage. Evelyn nodded slowly. Okay, but Noah... Yeah? If Calvin's willing to play this dirty, what else is he planning? That was exactly what worried Noah. Calvin had already tried to manipulate Evelyn into a bad marriage. Now he was trying to sabotage the gala. What would he do when those tactics failed? We need to be smarter than him, Noah said. That means assuming every offer of help is a trap, every coincidence is planned, and every person who suddenly wants to be friends has an ulterior motive. That's a paranoid way to live. That's survival when you're fighting someone with more money and fewer morals. Noah stood and offered his hand. Come on, let's get back to the inn and start planning our defense. They drove back in Noah's truck, and this time when they pulled up to the inn, Noah noticed things he'd missed before. The security was practically non-existent. No cameras, no alarm system, locks that looked like they'd been installed in the 80s. If Calvin wanted to cause problems, he could walk right in. We need to upgrade security, Noah said as they walked inside. With what money? I'll figure something out. Maybe call in some favors. Noah pulled out his phone and started making a list. Cameras at every entrance, motion sensors in the ballroom, and anywhere valuable items are stored, new locks on all the doors, and we need to do it before the gala. Evelyn watched him work, something unreadable in her expression. You're really taking this seriously. Calvin made it personal when he tried to trick you into hiring a saboteur. Now I'm invested. Noah looked up from his phone. Besides, this is my building too now, legally speaking. No, it's not. We didn't do a prenup, but the inn was mine before the marriage. You have no claim to it. Then we should fix that. Evelyn tilted her head. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that if we're going to convince the bank this marriage is real, we need to act like real partners. That means shared assets, joint ownership. Noah could see the resistance forming in Evelyn's eyes and pressed forward before she could argue. I'm not trying to steal your inn, Evelyn. I'm trying to protect both of us. If Calvin challenges the marriage and wins, the bank could argue that I was never a legitimate guarantor. But if we're joint owners, that argument falls apart. You'd be risking everything. I already risked my land. What's one more thing? Noah kept his voice light, but he meant every word. We're in this together. That was the deal. Evelyn was quiet for a long moment, and Noah could almost see her calculating the angles, weighing the risks. Finally, she nodded. Okay, we'll draw up papers for joint ownership, 50-50. You sure? No, but you're right. It makes the marriage more credible. And if we're going to survive Calvin, we need every advantage we can get. They shook hands on it, and Noah felt the weight of responsibility settle even heavier on his shoulders. He owned half an inn now, half a historic building that was falling apart and drowning in debt, half a dream that might be impossible to save. But at least he wouldn't be fighting alone. The rest of the day was a blur of logistics. Noah spent 3 hours on the phone with his crew, rearranging schedules and calling in favors to get the ballroom floor project started immediately. Evelyn worked on the business plan for the bank, her laptop open on the dining room table, surrounded by spreadsheets and historical records and projections that were probably too optimistic but at least looked professional. Around 7, Noah's phone rang. Emma. He answered immediately. Hey kiddo, what's up?
Mom said you got married. Emma's voice was carefully neutral, the way it always was when she was processing something big. Is that true? Noah's stomach dropped. He'd wanted to tell her in person, with Evelyn there, in a controlled environment where he could manage her reaction. But of course Jennifer had told her, because Jennifer was angry, and when Jennifer was angry, she made choices that punished Noah even if they hurt Emma too. Yeah, it's true, Noah said, walking out to the porch so Evelyn wouldn't overhear. I was going to tell you this weekend when I picked you up. Who is she? Her name is Evelyn. You've met her before. She owns Riverside Inn, where I've been working. There was a pause. The lady with the cool old building? That's the one. And you married her? Like, for real married? For real married. Noah sat down on the porch steps, phone pressed to his ear. I know it's sudden, Emma, and I know you probably have a lot of questions. But I need you to trust me, okay? I wouldn't do this if I didn't think it was the right thing. Does this mean I have to call her Mom? No, you can call her Evelyn. Noah's heart ached at the worry in his daughter's voice. She's not trying to replace your mom. Nobody could replace your mom. She's just someone I care about, someone I want to build a life with. Do you love her? That question again. The one Noah didn't have a clean answer for. I care about her a lot, Noah said carefully. And I think love is something that grows over time. We're still figuring it out. Emma absorbed that. Mom's mad at you. I know, but she'll get over it. Eventually, maybe. Are you happy, Dad? The question caught Noah off guard. Was he happy? He'd signed his life away to save a building he didn't own for a woman he barely knew, and now he was lying to his daughter about why he'd done it. Happy wasn't exactly the word he'd use. But when he thought about Evelyn, about her fierce determination to save her mother's legacy, about the way she'd stood in the rain in a ruined wedding dress and asked for his help, he felt something. Not happiness, exactly, but purpose. Like maybe his life meant something more than just surviving day to day. Yeah, Noah said. I think I am. Okay. Emma's voice lightened a little. Can I come see the inn this weekend? Mom said you're living there now. Of course. I'll pick you up Saturday morning like always. Cool. And Dad? Yeah? If Evelyn's mean to you, I'll kick her in the shins. Noah laughed despite himself. Thanks, kiddo, but I don't think that'll be necessary. After they hung up, Noah sat on the porch for a while, watching the sun set over the river. The inn was quiet behind him, just the creak of old wood and the hum of the ancient heating system Evelyn had finally turned on. It felt like a house waiting to wake up, like something dormant that needed the right touch to come back to life. The front door opened and Evelyn stepped out with 2 mugs of coffee. She handed one to Noah and sat down beside him on the steps. That was Emma, Noah said. I figured. How'd she take it? Better than Jennifer did. She wants to come to see the inn this weekend. Good. She should see where her father's living. Evelyn sipped her coffee. Does she hate me? She threatened to kick you if you're mean to me. So I'd say you're on probation. Evelyn smiled faintly. I can work with that. They sat in companionable silence, drinking coffee and watching the last of the daylight fade. Noah found himself acutely aware of Evelyn's presence beside him. The way she held her mug with both hands, the slight tension in her shoulders that never quite went away, the intelligence in her eyes when she looked at him. What are you thinking about? Evelyn asked. How we're going to pull this off? Noah gestured at the inn. The gala, the bank, Calvin. It's a lot of moving pieces. We'll handle them one at a time. That's all we can do. And if it all falls apart? Evelyn looked at him then, really looked at him, and Noah saw something vulnerable beneath her usual armor. Then at least we went down fighting. Before Noah could respond, his phone buzzed with an email notification. He pulled it out, expecting something work-related. Instead, it was from an address he didn't recognize, with a subject line that made his blood run cold. Congratulations on your marriage. He opened it. The email was short, typed in a formal font that reminded Noah of legal documents. Dear Mr. Reed and Mrs. Moore, I wanted to personally congratulate you on your recent union. It's always heartwarming to see people find love, even in the most unexpected circumstances. I look forward to seeing you both at the Christmas gala. I've taken the liberty of purchasing a table for myself and several associates. Best wishes, Calvin Moore. Noah showed the email to Evelyn. Her face went pale. He's coming to the gala, she whispered. He's not just coming, he's bringing people. Associates. Noah's mind raced. He's going to make a scene, in front of all your donors, in front of everyone who matters. He's going to prove the marriage is fake. Evelyn set down her coffee mug with shaking hands. He'll have evidence, witnesses, something, and he'll present it publicly to humiliate me. Then we make sure there's nothing to find. Noah stood, pulling Evelyn up with him. Starting now, we're a real couple. Not just on paper, in every way that counts. We live together, we're seen together, we act like people who are actually married. Noah, I'm serious. Calvin wants to catch us in a lie? Then we don't give him one. Noah held Evelyn's gaze. Tomorrow, we're going out, to dinner, somewhere public, and we're going to act like newlyweds who are crazy about each other. I don't know how to do that. Neither do I, but we're going to learn. Noah squeezed her hand, because if Calvin thinks he can intimidate us, he's about to find out exactly how stubborn we both are. The next evening, they went to Russo's, an Italian restaurant on Main Street that was always crowded on Friday nights. Noah had made reservations, and when they walked in, heads turned. Not because they were anyone important, but because news of their marriage had spread, and everyone wanted to see the couple that had managed to shock the entire county. Evelyn had dressed up, a simple black dress that was elegant without being flashy, her hair down and curling slightly at the ends. Noah wore the same suit he'd worn to the courthouse, but this time with a tie that didn't look like it had been stored in a drawer for 5 years. They sat at a table by the window, visible to everyone, and ordered wine they didn't really want. This feels like a performance, Evelyn murmured, keeping a smile on her face. That's because it is. Noah reached across the table and took her hand, feeling how cold her fingers were. Just breathe, we've got this. The waiter came, and they ordered food neither of them was hungry for. Around them, conversations dropped to whispers as people tried not to stare while obviously staring. Do you think Calvin has someone here watching us? Evelyn asked quietly. Probably. But that's the point. Let them watch. Noah rubbed his thumb across her knuckles and saw her surprise at the gesture. We're giving them a show. 2 people who are happy, comfortable with each other, clearly in love. Except we're not in love. They don't know that. Noah leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. What they see is a couple holding hands, looking at each other like we're the only people in the room. That's all we need to sell. Evelyn's eyes searched his face. You're good at this. At lying? At making people believe what you want them to believe. Noah wasn't sure if that was a compliment or an accusation. I spent 2 years pretending my marriage to Jennifer was fine when it was falling apart. I learned how to perform. Something flickered in Evelyn's expression. Sympathy, maybe. Or understanding. I'm sorry that happened to you. It was a long time ago. Noah kept his hand on hers, aware that people were watching. What about you? Any practice relationships I should know about? A few. None that lasted. Evelyn's smile turned self-deprecating. Turns out most men don't like being with someone who's married to their work. Their loss? The food arrived and they ate slowly, keeping up a conversation that looked intimate from a distance, but was actually them discussing the ballroom floor repairs and security camera placement. To anyone watching, they looked like newlyweds who couldn't stop talking to each other. The truth was more complicated, but that was the beauty of performance. The audience saw what they wanted to see. Halfway through dinner, Noah saw someone approach their table. A woman in her 60s, elegantly dressed, with the kind of confidence that came from old money and social status. Evelyn Moore, the woman said warmly. Or should I say Evelyn Reed now? Evelyn stood, and Noah followed her lead. Mrs. Hartford, what a surprise. I just had to come over and congratulate you both. I heard about your marriage, and I think it's wonderful. Mrs. Hartford beamed at Noah. You must be Noah. I've heard such lovely things about your work on the inn. Thank you, ma'am, Noah said, shaking her hand. I wanted you to know that I'll be attending the Christmas gala, and I'm bringing several friends. We're all very excited to see what you've done with the place. Mrs. Hartford patted Evelyn's arm. Your mother would be so proud, dear. You found someone who truly supports you.
After Mrs. Hartford left, Evelyn sat down heavily. She's one of the major donors I told you about, the one I thought had pulled out. Looks like she changed her mind. Because she thinks we're in love. Evelyn stared at Noah. This is working. Of course it's working. We're very convincing. Noah raised his wine glass. To us, the most married-unmarried couple in the county. Evelyn clinked her glass against his, and for a moment their eyes met and held. Something passed between them. Not quite attraction, but not quite friendship either. An acknowledgement, maybe, that they were both in deeper than they'd planned, but neither was ready to back out. They finished dinner, paid the check, and walked out into the cool evening air. Noah's truck was parked down the street, and they walked slowly, close enough that their shoulders brushed. That wasn't as terrible as I thought it would be, Evelyn admitted. High praise. I'm serious. I thought I'd hate having to pretend, but with you, it didn't feel like pretending. It felt like... She trailed off, searching for the word. Survival? Noah suggested. Partnership, Evelyn corrected. She stopped walking and turned to face him. Thank you for doing this, for not making me feel weak for needing help. Noah wanted to tell her she was never weak, that asking for help took more strength than suffering alone. But before he could find the words, someone called out from across the street. Well, well, if it isn't the happy couple. Calvin Moore stood under a streetlight, hands in the pockets of an expensive coat, smiling like a shark that had just smelled blood in the water. Noah's entire body tensed, but Evelyn's hand found his, squeezing tight, a warning, don't react, don't give him what he wants. Calvin, Evelyn said coolly, what a coincidence. Hardly a coincidence. I've been meaning to properly meet your new husband. Calvin crossed the street, moving with the casual confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequences. Noah Reed. I've heard so much about you. Wish I could say the same, Noah replied. Calvin's smile widened. Oh, I doubt that. Evelyn tends to speak poorly of me, sibling rivalry and all that. He looked between them. Though I suppose we're not siblings anymore. You're family now, Noah, which means you should know what you've gotten yourself into. I know exactly what I've gotten into. Do you? Calvin's eyes were cold despite his pleasant tone. Did Evelyn tell you about the inn's foundation issues, the electrical code violations, the fact that the building should probably be condemned rather than hosting 300 people for a Christmas gala? She told me everything, Noah said evenly, and I married her anyway. How romantic. Calvin's gaze shifted to Evelyn. I have to hand it to you, sister. Marrying your contractor to save the inn, that's creative. Desperate, but creative. It's not desperate when it works, Evelyn shot back. We'll see about that. Calvin pulled an envelope from his coat pocket and handed it to Evelyn. Consider this a formal notice. I'm challenging your marriage on the grounds that it was entered into fraudulently for financial gain. I've already filed the paperwork with the county. You'll both need to appear in court in 2 weeks to defend yourselves. Evelyn's face went white, but her hand remained steady as she took the envelope. You can't prove fraud. Can't I? You ran away from a wedding on Sunday night and married your contractor on Tuesday morning. That's a suspicious timeline, Evelyn. And when I present evidence that you've been struggling financially for years, that this marriage conveniently qualifies you for a loan refinance, that you two barely know each other, Calvin shrugged. Well, I think a judge will find it very interesting. Noah stepped forward, placing himself slightly between Calvin and Evelyn. It was a subtle move, but Calvin noticed. His smile faltered just slightly. You're wasting your time and money, Noah said quietly. Our marriage is legal and legitimate. We love each other and we're building a life together. If you want to drag us to court over it, go ahead, but you're going to lose. We'll see. Calvin stepped back, his pleasant mask slipping back into place. Enjoy your evening, newlyweds. I'll see you in court. He walked away, disappearing into the night, and Noah felt Evelyn's hand trembling in his. He's really doing it, she whispered. He's going to challenge the marriage. Then we fight back. Noah turned to her, gripping both her hands now. We have 2 weeks before that court date. 2 weeks to build a case that we're legitimately married. And we start by going home together, to our inn, and acting like the married couple we're supposed to be. Evelyn nodded, but Noah could see the fear in her eyes. Calvin had just raised the stakes impossibly high.
If they lost in court, the marriage would be annulled. The bank would pull their loan. The inn would be sold. And Noah would be left with nothing but the wreckage of a gamble that hadn't paid off. But as they drove back to the inn in silence, Noah realized something that surprised him. He didn't regret it. Not the marriage, not the risk, not even the impending court battle. Because for the first time in 2 years since his divorce and the custody battles and the slow grind of just surviving, Noah felt like he was fighting for something that mattered. And Evelyn, sitting beside him with her jaw set and determination burning in her eyes, was worth fighting for, even if she'd never asked him to. The inn felt different when they got back that night. Colder, maybe. Or perhaps it was just the weight of Calvin's threat settling over everything like frost. Noah helped Evelyn out of the truck, and they stood in the driveway for a moment, looking up at the building that had become the center of their precarious alliance. 2 weeks, Evelyn said quietly. That's all we have to prepare. Then we use every minute. Noah locked the truck and followed her up the front steps. First thing tomorrow, we call a lawyer, someone who specializes in family law and fraud cases. We need to know exactly what Calvin has to prove and how we counter it. Inside, Evelyn dropped her purse on the entry table and leaned against the wall, suddenly looking exhausted. The performance at the restaurant had taken more out of her than she'd let on. This is my fault. I dragged you into this mess, and now you could lose everything. I chose this, Evelyn. Nobody forced me. Noah locked the front door behind them, making a mental note to get those new locks installed immediately. And I'm not planning to lose. Calvin has resources we don't have. Money, connections, lawyers who've been on retainer since before we were born. Evelyn's voice cracked slightly. What if he finds something? What if there's some legal loophole that proves we committed fraud? Noah crossed to her and took her shoulders gently, making her look at him. Listen to me. We didn't commit fraud. We got married legally for real reasons. Maybe not the traditional reasons, but real ones. You needed help. I offered it. We signed papers that made us legal partners. That's not fraud. That's two adults making a choice. A choice motivated by financial desperation. A choice motivated by survival. There's a difference. Noah's hand slid down to take hers. Calvin wants you to panic. He wants you to think you've already lost so you won't fight back. Don't give him that satisfaction. Evelyn took a shaky breath and nodded. Okay. You're right. We fight. Damn right we fight. Noah squeezed her hands once more before letting go. Now go get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. But sleep didn't come easily for either of them. Noah lay in his guest room, staring at the ceiling and running through scenarios. What evidence would Calvin present? Probably the timeline, the speed of their marriage, the convenient timing with the loan refinance. Maybe he'd found witnesses who could testify that Noah and Evelyn had never seemed romantic before the wedding. Maybe he'd argue that living in separate rooms proved they weren't really married. That last thought made Noah sit up in bed. Separate rooms. If Calvin's lawyers came to inspect the inn, they'd see immediately that he and Evelyn weren't sharing a bedroom. That would be ammunition for their case. Noah grabbed his phone and texted Evelyn, hoping she was still awake. Are you up? Her response came within seconds. Can't sleep, you? Same. Can I come to your room? We need to talk about something. There was a pause, and Noah worried he'd overstepped. Then, doors unlocked. Evelyn's room was at the end of the hallway, and when Noah knocked softly and pushed the door open, he found her sitting up in bed with her laptop, surrounded by papers and what looked like legal research. She'd changed into pajamas, simple cotton pants and a tank top, and her hair was pulled back in a messy bun. She looked younger like this, more vulnerable without her usual armor of professional clothing and careful composure. What's wrong? She asked, setting the laptop aside. Noah sat on the edge of her bed, keeping a respectful distance. I was thinking about Calvin's case, about what he might use as evidence. I've been thinking about the same thing. Evelyn gestured at her laptop. I've been researching fraudulent marriage cases. Most of them hinge on proof that the couple didn't live as spouses. Separate finances, separate residences, no evidence of a genuine relationship. Separate bedrooms, Noah added. Evelyn's eyes widened as she understood. You think he'll check? I think he'll do whatever it takes to win. And if his lawyers come here and see that you're in the master suite and I'm in a guest room down the hall, that's going to look suspicious. So what are you suggesting? Noah took a breath. I'm suggesting we share a room. Not necessarily a bed. We can figure that out. But we need to look like a married couple who actually sleeps in the same space. Evelyn was quiet for a long moment, processing. This room is big enough for both of us. There's a couch by the window that you could sleep on, or we could bring in a cot, or we could just share the bed like adults. Noah saw her tense and quickly added, with boundaries. I'll stay on my side, you stay on yours. We've both survived worse situations. Have we? Evelyn's smile was wry. I'm not sure I've ever been in a fake marriage facing a legal challenge while trying to save my family legacy and prevent financial ruin. This is new territory. Then we navigate it together. Noah stood. I'll move my stuff in tomorrow. For tonight, you should try to get some sleep. Noah. Evelyn's voice stopped him at the door. Thank you for not making this weird. It's already weird, Noah said honestly, but we'll get through it anyway. The next morning started with Emma's arrival. Noah had picked her up early before Jennifer could change her mind about letting her visit the inn. Emma had brought an overnight bag and her favorite stuffed elephant, and she'd been unusually quiet on the drive over, a sure sign she was nervous. Is Evelyn nice? Emma asked as they pulled up to the inn. She's direct, Noah said carefully. She doesn't do baby talk or pretend things are different than they are. But yeah, she's nice, in her own way. Mom says she married you for money. Noah's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Of course Jennifer had said that. Your mom is upset because the marriage was sudden and she wasn't prepared for it. But Evelyn didn't marry me for money. We're partners. What does that mean? It means we help each other. I help her fix the inn. She helps me have a place to work and build something meaningful. We make each other stronger. Noah looked at his daughter. Does that make sense? Emma nodded slowly. I guess. Can I see my room? Evelyn was waiting on the front porch when they arrived, and Noah watched his daughter study his new wife with the intense scrutiny only a 9-year-old could manage. Evelyn, to her credit, didn't try too hard. She simply smiled and said, You must be Emma. Your dad talks about you constantly. He does? Emma glanced at Noah, who nodded. Constantly, Evelyn confirmed. Come on, I'll show you your room. I cleared out the blue guest room on the second floor. It has a window seat that overlooks the river. Emma's eyes lit up. A window seat? With pillows and everything, perfect for reading. Evelyn led the way inside, and Emma followed, curiosity overcoming her nervousness. Noah trailed behind them, watching the interaction. Evelyn wasn't trying to be Emma's new mother or best friend. She was just being herself, straightforward, competent, treating Emma like a capable person rather than a child who needed to be coddled. And Emma, who'd inherited her father's bullshit detector, responded to that authenticity. By the time they'd toured Emma's room and the rest of the inn, Emma was asking questions about the building's history and whether there were any secret passages. Evelyn admitted there was a dumbwaiter that hadn't worked in 40 years, and Emma immediately declared that fixing it should be their top priority. After we fix the ballroom floor and install security cameras and prepare for the gala, Evelyn said, completely serious, then we can work on the dumbwaiter. Deal. Emma stuck out her hand and Evelyn shook it solemnly. Noah's phone rang. Mike. I'll be right back, Noah said, stepping out onto the porch to take the call. Hey, what's up? Are you sitting down? Mike asked. Should I be? Calvin Moore just hired Reginald Finch. Noah's stomach dropped. Reginald Finch was a lawyer who specialized in high-profile family law cases. He was expensive, ruthless, and he won. A lot. How do you know that? Noah asked. My cousin works at Finch's firm. She heard them prepping the case. Noah, this guy doesn't take cases unless he thinks he can destroy the opposition. Calvin's serious about this. So are we. Noah's jaw clenched. Thanks for the heads up. After hanging up, Noah stood on the porch, trying to process this new development. Finch wasn't just any lawyer. He was the kind of attorney who could make a legitimate marriage look fraudulent if it served his client's interests. They needed to be perfect. No mistakes, no inconsistencies, no cracks in their story. Evelyn found him 20 minutes later. Emma's unpacking. She wants to help with the ballroom floor later. Of course she does. Noah managed to smile. She's fearless like that. Takes after her father. Evelyn leaned against the porch railing beside him. What's wrong? You've got your worried face on. Calvin hired Reginald Finch. Evelyn went pale. The Reginald Finch? The one who got that state senator's prenup thrown out? That's the one. We're screwed.
We're challenged, Noah corrected. There's a difference. Yes, Finch is good, but we're not lying about being married. We're not faking documents. We're just two people who got married quickly for practical reasons. That's not illegal. It's suspicious. Then we make it less suspicious. Noah turned to face her fully. Starting now, we're all in. No more hesitation, no more keeping distance. We're married, and we act like it. Before Evelyn could respond, Emma opened the front door. Dad, can Evelyn teach me how to use power tools? She said she knows how to use a circular saw. Noah looked at Evelyn, who shrugged. She asked if I knew how to fix things. I told her yes. She extrapolated from there. She's 9 years old. I was using power tools at 9, Evelyn pointed out. Under supervision, obviously. Emma bounced on her toes. Please, Dad, I'll wear safety goggles and everything. Noah sighed. He was outnumbered and outmaneuvered. Fine, but you listen to every word Evelyn says, and if she tells you to stop, you stop immediately. Yes! Emma pumped her fist and ran back inside to get her shoes. Evelyn watched her go with something like amusement in her eyes. She's going to be trouble when she's older. She's trouble now, but Noah was smiling. Thank you for being good with her. I like her, she's honest. Evelyn pushed off the railing. Come on, let's go teach your daughter how to safely operate dangerous machinery. What could possibly go wrong? The weekend passed in a blur of activity. Emma helped Noah and Evelyn work on the ballroom floor, wearing oversized safety goggles and taking her responsibilities with adorable seriousness. The crew Noah had hired showed up Saturday afternoon, and by Sunday evening the floor was reinforced and safe enough to host an army, let alone 300 gala guests. Emma loved the inn. She loved exploring the empty rooms, loved the way her footsteps echoed in the hallways, loved sitting in the window seat of her room and watching the river. And she loved watching Noah and Evelyn work together, though Noah caught her studying them sometimes with a thoughtful expression he couldn't quite read. On Sunday night, after Emma had gone to bed in her room down the hall, Noah and Evelyn sat in the kitchen with coffee, both exhausted. She didn't ask about the sleeping arrangements, Evelyn observed. She's probably too excited about the inn to think about it. Noah rubbed his eyes. I'll move my stuff into your room tomorrow while she's at school. Our room, Evelyn corrected quietly. If we're doing this, we need to commit to the language. She was right. Our room, our inn, our marriage. The words felt strange in Noah's mouth, but he was getting used to strange. Monday brought the lawyer. Noah and Evelyn had found one through Mike's contacts, Helen Greaves, a woman in her 50s who specialized in family law and had a reputation for being tough and thorough. She met them at the inn, declined coffee, and got straight to business. I've reviewed Calvin Moore's filing, Helen said, spreading papers across the dining room table. He's arguing that your marriage was entered into solely for financial gain, with no intention of creating a genuine marital relationship. To prove fraud, he needs to demonstrate that you both knowingly deceived the government and the bank with false pretenses. But we are married, Noah said, legally. Legal marriage isn't the question. The question is intent. Did you marry with the intention of being spouses, or did you marry to solve a business problem? Helen looked between them. I need the truth, not the story you're telling everyone else. The truth. Noah and Evelyn exchanged a glance. Finally, Evelyn spoke. We married to solve a business problem, she admitted, but with the intention of honoring the commitment for as long as necessary. We're not faking the marriage. We're living together, sharing finances, building a partnership. How long have you known each other? 6 months, Noah said. And how long were you romantically involved before the marriage? Silence. Helen nodded like she'd expected that. So you went from professional relationship to marriage with no romantic period in between. We became friends, Evelyn said. We spent time together, got to know each other. The marriage was fast, but it wasn't random. That's the narrative we'll use. You were friends who became something more,
And when the financial crisis with the inn came to a head, you decided to formalize your partnership through marriage. Helen made notes. It's not romantic, but it's not fraudulent either. Many marriages start for practical reasons. Will that be enough to defeat Finch? Noah asked. Honestly, I don't know. Finch is going to argue that the timeline is suspicious, that you're living a lie, that this is all a performance to defraud the bank. We need to prove that your marriage, however unconventional, is genuine. Helen closed her folder. That means evidence. Witnesses who can testify you're living as spouses, joint financial accounts, shared property, and most importantly, you need to appear in court as a couple who actually likes each other. After Helen left, Noah and Evelyn sat in silence for a long moment. Joint financial accounts, Evelyn said finally. I hate the idea of mixing our money. I'm not thrilled about it either, but she's right. We need to show we're financially entangled. Noah pulled out his phone. I'll call the bank tomorrow and set up a joint account. We can each keep our personal accounts, but we'll have one together for shared expenses. The inn expenses. And household stuff, groceries, utilities, whatever married people pay for together. Noah looked at her. This is really happening, isn't it? We're all in now. We were all in the moment we signed that marriage certificate. Evelyn stood and started clearing the coffee mugs. I'm going to bed. Tomorrow I have to meet with the caterer for the gala, and if I don't get some sleep, I might commit murder. Noah watched her go, then headed upstairs to move his belongings into their shared room. It felt surreal, packing his clothes into the dresser beside Evelyn's, hanging his shirts in the closet next to her dresses. This was supposed to be temporary. 6 months, she'd said. But standing in this room, surrounded by the evidence of their intertwined lives, Noah wondered if anything about this situation could truly be temporary. The bed was massive, at least a king, with enough space that 2 people could sleep without touching. Noah claimed the left side, leaving Evelyn the right where she usually slept. He found spare pillows in the linen closet and built a small barrier down the middle, just for the first few nights until they got used to sharing space. When Evelyn came up an hour later, she paused in the doorway, taking in the changes. You built a pillow wall, she observed, for boundaries, until we're comfortable. Very chivalrous. Evelyn moved to her side of the bed and sat down. This is strange. Extremely strange. Noah climbed into his side, keeping carefully to his own territory. But we'll adapt. They lay in the darkness, both hyper-aware of the other person's presence. Noah could hear Evelyn's breathing, feel the slight movement of the mattress when she shifted positions. It was intimate in a way he hadn't anticipated. This sharing of space with someone who was legally his wife, but still felt like a stranger in so many ways. Noah? Evelyn's voice came soft through the darkness. Yeah? What happens if we lose in court? He'd been wondering the same thing. We'll cross that bridge if we come to it. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have right now. Noah turned his head toward her, though he could barely see her outline in the dark. But I can tell you this, I'm not going to let Calvin win without a fight. Whatever happens, we face it together. Together, Evelyn repeated, like she was testing the word. I'm not used to having a partner. Neither am I. We'll figure it out as we go. The days blurred together after that. Noah worked on the inn during the day, reinforcing structures, updating electrical, making the building safe and beautiful for the gala. Evelyn managed the business side, coordinating with vendors and donors and the historical society. And in the evenings, they practiced being married. They had dinner together every night, cooked in the inn's industrial kitchen, and eaten at the small table by the window. They talked about their days, shared stories from their pasts, learned each other's habits and preferences. Noah discovered that Evelyn was fanatically organized, but had a weakness for bad action movies. Evelyn learned that Noah couldn't cook without making a mess, but had an unexpected talent for solving complex structural problems. They went out in public together, were seen around town, built the appearance of a normal married couple. And slowly, almost without noticing it, the performance started to feel less like acting and more like routine. Mike visited one evening and found them working side by side in the ballroom, Noah on a ladder adjusting light fixtures while Evelyn marked measurements on the floor for table placement. You two look domestic, Mike observed, making both of them startle. We're working, Evelyn said. You're synchronized. There's a difference. Mike grinned at Noah. Remember when you first started this job and you complained that Evelyn was too controlling? I never said that, Noah protested. You absolutely said that. You called her a perfectionist who couldn't delegate. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. Did you now? In my defense, you are a perfectionist who can't delegate. Fair point. Evelyn went back to her measurements, but Noah caught the hint of a smile. Mike pulled Noah aside while Evelyn was distracted. How's the court case prep going? Helen thinks we have a shot if we can prove we're genuinely living as spouses. The problem is, Finch is going to pick apart every detail of our relationship looking for cracks. Are there cracks? Noah thought about the pillow wall that had disappeared 3 nights ago when Evelyn had declared it ridiculous and unnecessary. He thought about how they'd fallen into a rhythm of morning coffee together, how Evelyn had started leaving sticky notes with reminders for him, how he'd begun to anticipate her moods and needs without being asked. Fewer than there were a week ago, Noah admitted. That's either a really good thing or a really dangerous thing, Mike said quietly. You know that, right? I know. Oh, because this was supposed to be temporary, a business arrangement. And if you're starting to actually care about her, I'm not. Noah cut him off too quickly. I mean, I care about her as a person, as a partner, but this is still what we agreed to. 6 months and then we reassess. Mike looked skeptical but didn't push. Just be careful, man. Hearts don't always follow the plan. After Mike left, Noah climbed down from the ladder to find Evelyn watching him with an unreadable expression. What? He asked. Nothing. I just realized I don't know what happens after 6 months. Evelyn set down her tape measure. We never talked about the endgame. The endgame is you save the inn, we prove to the bank it's viable, and then we decide if we want to stay married or get a quiet divorce. And if I want to stay married, the question caught Noah completely off guard. Why would you want that? I don't know. Maybe because this partnership works. Maybe because having someone to share the burden with makes everything more bearable. Maybe because I've gotten used to having you around. Evelyn's voice was carefully neutral. Or maybe I'm just terrified of going back to being alone. Noah crossed to where she stood, aware that this conversation was happening in the middle of the ballroom where anyone could walk in, but suddenly not caring. You're not alone, Evelyn. Even if we get divorced, we're still partners in this place. I've got half ownership now, remember? You're stuck with me either way. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? Before Evelyn could answer, both their phones buzzed simultaneously. A message from Helen Greaves. Court date moved up. Calvin filed for expedited hearing. We're in front of the judge in 5 days. 5 days. They just lost a week and a half of preparation time. Noah looked at Evelyn and saw his own panic reflected in her eyes. We're not ready. Then we get ready. Evelyn's jaw set with familiar determination. We have 5 days to build an unshakable case that this marriage is real, so that's what we do. How? We stop holding back. Evelyn took his hand, her grip firm. We stop treating this like a performance and start treating it like the truth. Because maybe it is the truth now. Maybe we've been so busy pretending to be married that we actually became married. Noah wanted to argue, to point out all the ways they were still just playing roles. But standing there with Evelyn's hand in his, in the ballroom they'd restored together, in the inn they were fighting to save, he couldn't quite find the words. Because maybe she was right. Maybe somewhere between the courthouse and the pillow wall and the shared coffee mornings, they'd stopped faking and started building something real. Okay, Noah said. 5 days. We make this count. Evelyn nodded, then did something that surprised them both. She leaned in and kissed him. Not a performance kiss like the one at the restaurant. A real kiss. Soft and tentative and searching, like she was trying to figure out what they actually were to each other. When she pulled back, her cheeks were flushed. Sorry, I just wanted to know if it felt like lying. And? Noah's heart was pounding. It didn't. Evelyn stepped back, flustered in a way he'd never seen her. We should get back to work. But for the rest of the night, Noah couldn't stop thinking about that kiss, about the way it had felt natural rather than forced, about how Evelyn had looked at him afterward, surprised and confused and maybe a little hopeful. 5 days until court. 5 days to prove their marriage was real, and Noah was starting to realize he wouldn't have to fake it. The courthouse steps were crowded with people Noah didn't recognize, and he realized with a sinking feeling that Calvin had turned this into a spectacle. Reporters lingered near the entrance, cameras ready. Local business owners who'd probably heard through the gossip chain stood in clusters, pretending they had business inside but really just wanting to witness the drama. Evelyn's hand found Noah's as they climbed the steps, her grip tight enough to hurt. She dressed in a charcoal suit that made her look formidable and professional, her hair pulled back in a severe bun. Noah wore his good suit again, the one that was getting more mileage than he'd ever anticipated when he bought it. Helen Greaves met them at the entrance, her expression grim. Finch brought witnesses, a lot of them. Who? Evelyn asked. Former employees from the inn? People who worked with you before Noah came along. The bank manager who handled your previous loan applications. He's building a narrative that you were desperate and alone, and this marriage was a last-ditch attempt to save yourself. Helen adjusted her briefcase. We need to counter with our own witnesses, people who can testify to the genuine nature of your relationship. We have Mike, Noah said. Mike's your best friend. Of course he'll vouch for you. We need someone less biased. Helen looked between them. What about Emma? Your daughter? Noah's stomach dropped. Absolutely not. I'm not putting my 9-year-old daughter on the stand to defend my marriage. She could testify to what she's observed, how you and Evelyn interact, whether the relationship seems genuine. No. Noah's voice was firm. Emma stays out of this. Find another way. Helen nodded, not arguing. Then we focus on documentation, financial records, witness testimony from neutral parties, evidence that you're living as spouses. Be prepared for Finch to attack every aspect of your relationship. He's going to make you look like criminals. Inside the courtroom, Calvin sat at the plaintiff's table with Reginald Finch, looking confident and relaxed. He caught Noah's eye and smiled, a predator's smile that made Noah want to vault over the barrier and wipe it off his face. Evelyn's hand tightened on his, a silent reminder to stay calm. The judge entered, a woman in her 60s named Patricia Hoffman, who had a reputation for no-nonsense rulings and zero tolerance for theatrics. She reviewed the case file briefly, then looked up at both tables. This is a petition to annul a marriage on grounds of fraud, Judge Hoffman said. Mr. Finch, you're arguing that the marriage between Noah Reed and Evelyn Moore was entered into fraudulently for financial gain. Present your evidence. Finch stood, every inch the polished attorney in his expensive suit. Your Honor, the evidence will show that Miss Moore was facing financial ruin. Her inn was over-leveraged, the bank was threatening to foreclose, and she had exhausted all legitimate options for refinancing. Then, conveniently, she married her contractor, a man she'd known for only 6 months, less than 48 hours after fleeing from another wedding. The timing is not coincidental, it's calculated. He called his first witness, Robert Henshaw from the bank. Henshaw testified that Evelyn had been turned down for refinancing multiple times, that she'd been warned her loan would be called if she couldn't provide a second guarantor. He confirmed that Noah's assets and the marriage had made them eligible for refinancing. Did Ms. Moore ever mention Noah Reed in previous meetings about her loan? Finch asked. Not that I recall, Henshaw said. She always came alone. I was surprised when she brought him in as her spouse. Surprised why? Because there had been no indication of a romantic relationship. She'd never mentioned having a partner. Finch smiled. No further questions. Helen cross-examined, but there wasn't much damage to undo. Henshaw had simply stated facts, and those facts made their marriage look suspicious. The next witness was worse. Margaret Chen, who'd been the inn's event coordinator until Evelyn had to let her go 6 months earlier due to budget cuts. Margaret testified that Evelyn had been stressed and desperate during her final months of employment, that she'd mentioned needing to find a co-signer for her loan. Did she mention Noah Reed specifically? Finch asked. She mentioned her contractor was doing good work, but she never indicated they were romantically involved. If they were, she would have told me. We were close. And after you were let go, did Miss Moore reach out to you? Maintain the friendship? Margaret's expression hardened. No, I never heard from her again until I received a subpoena for this hearing. Evelyn flinched beside Noah, and he realized this was hurting her more than she'd let on. Margaret had been more than an employee. She'd been a friend,
and Evelyn had cut her off when money got tight. Another casualty of trying to save the inn alone. By the time Finch finished presenting his witnesses, the picture was clear and damning. Evelyn Moore had been desperate, isolated, and out of options. Then Noah Reed appeared, and suddenly she had a solution to all her problems. It looked exactly like fraud. "Your Honor," Finch said smoothly, "the pattern is undeniable. This marriage was a business transaction disguised as a romantic union. My client, Calvin Moore, has a legitimate interest in protecting his family's legacy and ensuring that fraud is not rewarded. We ask that this marriage be annulled and that Miss Moore be investigated for bank fraud." Judge Hoffman looked at Helen. "Counselor, your response?" Helen stood, and Noah could see the tension in her shoulders. This wasn't going well, and they all knew it. "Your Honor, the defense will show that while the circumstances of this marriage may be unconventional, they are not fraudulent. Noah Reed and Evelyn Moore entered into their marriage with full knowledge and consent, with the intention of building a genuine partnership. The timing may seem suspicious, but timing alone does not constitute fraud." She called Mike to the stand first. Mike testified that he'd witnessed Noah and Evelyn's growing friendship over the past 6 months, that he'd been their witness at the courthouse, that he'd seen them together and believed their relationship was genuine. Finch tore into him on cross-examination. "Mr. Patterson, you're Noah Reed's best friend, correct?" "Yeah. You'd do just about anything to help him out of a jam?" "I'd help him, yeah. But I wouldn't lie under oath. But you might shade the truth? Interpret things generously?" Finch smiled. "For instance, you testified that you witnessed their growing friendship. What exactly did you witness? Dinners? Romantic gestures? Declarations of love?" Mike hesitated, and Noah knew they were in trouble. "I saw them working together, getting along, building something. Building a business relationship, not a romantic one." Finch let that hang in the air. "Did you ever see them kiss before the wedding?" "No." "Hold hands?" "No." "Exchange any romantic affection whatsoever?" "They were keeping it private, or there was nothing to keep private." Finch turned to the judge. No further questions. Helen tried to recover with more witnesses, vendors who'd worked with both of them on the gala, neighbors who'd seen them at the inn together, but none of it was strong enough. They could prove Noah and Evelyn lived together and worked together, but they couldn't prove the marriage was anything more than a convenient arrangement. Then Finch dropped his final bomb. He called Calvin to the stand. Calvin testified calmly, painting himself as the concerned stepbrother who only wanted to protect his sister from her own poor judgment. He spoke about Evelyn's history of struggling with the inn, her mother's death, the financial pressures that had mounted over the years. "I tried to help her," Calvin said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "I offered to buy a parcel of land to take some of the financial burden off her shoulders, but she refused. She insisted on doing everything herself, even when it was clearly destroying her." "And when she married Noah Reed?" Finch prompted. "I was shocked. Evelyn had never mentioned having a boyfriend. She'd been focused entirely on the inn. And then suddenly, days after refusing my help, she shows up married to her contractor?" Calvin shook his head. "It was obviously a desperate move to qualify for a loan refinance. I felt I had no choice but to challenge it." "Out of concern for your sister?" "Out of concern for her well-being and the integrity of our family legacy." Noah's fists clenched under the table. The performance was sickening, Calvin playing the caring brother when everyone who knew him understood he was just trying to steal the inn. Helen cross-examined, trying to expose Calvin's true motivations, but he was too smooth, too prepared. He deflected every question, maintained his concerned brother routine, and made himself look like the reasonable party while painting Evelyn and Noah as con artists. When Calvin stepped down, Judge Hoffman called for a recess. Noah and Evelyn retreated to a conference room with Helen, and the moment the door closed, Evelyn sank into a chair. "We're losing," she said quietly. Helen didn't sugarcoat it. "Finch built a strong case. Without clear evidence that your marriage has a romantic foundation, it looks exactly like what Calvin's claiming, a business arrangement." "Because that's what it started as," Noah said, "but it's not what it is now. Then you need to prove that. The judge needs to see genuine emotion, genuine connection. She needs to believe you're actually in love." Helen looked between them. When you take the stand, you can't just recite facts. You have to make her feel what you feel for each other. After Helen left to prepare her closing arguments, Noah and Evelyn sat alone in the conference room. Through the window, they could see the courtroom filling back up, people taking their seats for the final act of this drama. "I'm sorry," Evelyn said finally. "I should never have asked you to do this. You're going to lose everything because of me." "We're going to lose everything," Noah corrected. "We're in this together, remember? But it's my fault." "Evelyn." Noah moved his chair closer, taking her hands. "I made a choice. Nobody forced me. And even knowing how this might end, I'd make the same choice again." "Why?" It was the question Noah had been avoiding since the moment he'd driven through that storm to pick her up. Why had he said yes? Why had he risked everything for a woman he barely knew? Why did the thought of losing this fight make his chest ache in a way that had nothing to do with money or property? "Because you needed help, and I was in a position to give it," Noah said slowly. "Because I admire the hell out of you for fighting so hard to save something that matters. Because somewhere between the courthouse and the pillow wall and all those late nights working on the inn, you stopped being my employer and started being my partner, my friend, my—" He stopped, the word catching in his throat. "Your what?" Evelyn's eyes were locked on his. "My wife," Noah finished quietly. "Not fake, not temporary, real." Evelyn's breath caught. "Noah, I know we said 6 months. I know this was supposed to be practical and temporary, but it stopped being practical the moment I started looking forward to having coffee with you every morning. It stopped being temporary when I realized I'd rather argue with you about paint colors than have an easy conversation with anyone else. It stopped being fake when I kissed you back in that ballroom and realized I didn't want to stop." "You kissed me back?" Evelyn's voice was barely a whisper. "I thought I surprised you." "You did, but I kissed you back anyway." Noah squeezed her hands. "So when we go back in that courtroom and the judge asks if our marriage is real, I'm going to tell her the truth. That it started as a solution to a problem, but it became something neither of us expected. Something worth fighting for." Evelyn's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I didn't think I was capable of this, of letting someone in, of trusting someone enough to share the burden. But you made it easy. You made me want to try." "Is that your way of saying you love me?" "I don't know. Maybe. I've never been in love before, so I don't have a reference point." Evelyn laughed shakily. "But I know that I wake up every morning grateful you're there. I know that when I think about the future, you're in it, and I know that losing this case scares me less than losing you." Noah pulled her into a kiss, right there in the conference room with the court case waiting and their entire future hanging in the balance. It was desperate and fierce and full of all the things they'd been too scared to say out loud. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. "We should get back in there," Noah said. "Should we tell Helen about this development? About us falling in love in the middle of our fraud trial?" Noah grinned despite the gravity of the situation. "Yeah, she probably needs to know." But before they could move, the door opened and a clerk stuck her head in. "Judge Hoffman is ready to resume, and she wants to see both of you in chambers." That was unusual. Noah and Evelyn exchanged a worried glance as they followed the clerk through a side door into Judge Hoffman's chambers. The judge sat behind her desk, still in her robes, studying them with sharp eyes. "Sit down," she said, gesturing to the chairs across from her. They sat, and Noah noticed that Helen and Finch weren't present. This was just them and the judge. "I'm going to be frank with you both," Judge Hoffman said. "I've been presiding over family law cases for 23 years. I've seen every kind of marriage fraud you can imagine: fake green card marriages, marriages to hide assets during divorces, marriages to defraud insurance companies. I know what fraud looks like." Noah's heart sank. This was it. They'd lost. "But I've also seen unconventional marriages that started for practical reasons and became genuine partnerships. My own marriage started because my late husband needed health insurance, and I needed someone to co-sign a mortgage." Judge Hoffman leaned back in her chair. "We were married for 37 years before he passed. Best decision I ever made." Hope flickered in Noah's chest. "The evidence in this case is damning," the judge continued. "The timeline is suspicious. The circumstances reek of desperation. And Mr. Finch made a compelling argument that this marriage was entered into solely for financial gain."
Your Honor, Evelyn started, but the judge held up a hand. I'm not finished. The evidence is damning, but it's not the whole story. I've watched you two in my courtroom today. The way you look at each other, the way you move together, the way you defend each other even when it's not strategically necessary. That's not performance. That's real. Noah felt Evelyn's hand find his under the table. More importantly, Judge Hoffman said, I've dealt with Calvin Moore before. Different case, similar tactics. He's a predator who uses the legal system to destroy people who inconvenience him. And I do not appreciate my courtroom being used as a weapon in his petty family vendetta. She pulled out a file and opened it. I did some research during the recess. Turns out Calvin Moore has filed 17 separate legal actions against his stepsister over the past 8 years. Harassment complaints, property disputes, frivolous lawsuits. Not one of them has succeeded, but they've cost Miss Moore thousands in legal fees and caused significant stress. That's not relevant to this case, Finch protested from the doorway, where he'd apparently been listening. It's absolutely relevant, Mr. Finch. It establishes a pattern of harassment that undermines your client's credibility. Judge Hoffman closed the file. Here's my ruling. The marriage stands. The petition for annulment is denied. Noah couldn't breathe. Evelyn's hand tightened painfully on his, but he didn't care. Furthermore, the judge continued, I'm issuing a restraining order against Calvin Moore. He is not to contact Ms. Moore or Mr. Reed directly. He is not to file any further legal actions against them without first obtaining permission from this court. And if he violates these terms, he will be held in contempt. Finch's face had gone red. Your Honor, you can't. I can, and I just did. Mr. Moore has abused the legal system repeatedly, and it ends today. Judge Hoffman stood. Mr. Reed, Miss Moore, you're free to go, and congratulations on your marriage. I hope it lasts as long as mine did. They stumbled out of chambers in a daze. Helen was waiting in the hallway, looking confused. What happened? We won, Evelyn said, and then she started laughing, real, genuine laughter that sounded almost hysterical. We actually won! Helen whooped and pulled them both into a hug. Through the courtroom windows, Noah could see Calvin arguing furiously with Finch, both of them looking like they'd been blindsided by a truck. For once, Calvin Moore hadn't gotten his way. Outside the courthouse, reporters surged forward with questions, but Noah and Evelyn pushed through without comment. They made it to Noah's truck, climbed in, and just sat there for a moment in silence. We won, Noah said, testing the words. The marriage stands. Evelyn turned to him. We're still married. Yeah, is that okay? Instead of answering, Evelyn kissed him. Right there in the courthouse parking lot, in full view of anyone who wanted to look, she kissed him like she'd been waiting her whole life to do it. When they finally broke apart, both of them were grinning like idiots. I guess that's a yes, Noah said. Take me home, Evelyn said, to our inn. The drive back felt different, lighter, like they'd been carrying weights they didn't know about until someone cut the ropes. Noah reached for Evelyn's hand on the center console, and she laced her fingers through his without hesitation. What happens now? Evelyn asked. Now we plan a gala. Save your inn. Prove to the bank that we're viable. Noah glanced at her. And maybe we stop calling it a fake marriage and just call it a marriage. I'd like that. They pulled up to the inn just as the sun was beginning to set, painting the old Victorian in gold and amber light. It looked beautiful like this, not a crumbling relic, but a piece of history worth preserving. Worth fighting for. Inside, they found Mike sitting on the porch steps, beer in hand. Well, he demanded as they approached, don't leave me in suspense. Did you get annulled, or am I still technically a marriage witness? Still a witness, Noah said. We won. Mike let out a whoop and pulled them both into a crushing hug. I knew it. I knew Hoffman would see through Calvin's bullshit. She also issued a restraining order, Evelyn added. Calvin can't contact us without court permission. Even better, this calls for a celebration. Mike pulled out his phone. I'm ordering pizza, the good kind, not the cheap stuff. And we're drinking all the beer in my truck. Later, after Mike had left and the pizza boxes were stacked on the kitchen counter, Noah and Evelyn stood in the ballroom looking at the space they'd worked so hard to restore. The gala's in 3 weeks, Evelyn said. We need to finalize the seating chart, confirm the menu, Make sure the sound system works. We'll handle it. Noah wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. We make a pretty good team. The best team. Evelyn leaned back against him. Noah? Yeah? Thank you for coming to get me that night, for saying yes when any sane person would have run, for being exactly what I needed even when I didn't know I needed it. Noah turned her in his arms so she was facing him. You don't have to thank me. I got just as much out of this deal as you did. What did you get, besides a crumbling inn and a complicated marriage? Purpose. Partnership. Someone who challenges me to be better. Noah kissed her forehead. And maybe love, if you're still figuring that part out. I think I've figured it out, Evelyn said softly. I love you, Noah Reed, not because you saved me, not because you're helping with the inn, but because you see me, all the broken, stubborn, difficult parts, and you chose to stay anyway. I love you too, Noah said, and realized he'd probably loved her since that night in the rain, standing in her ruined wedding dress, asking for help in the only way she knew how. They kissed in the ballroom, surrounded by the ghosts of parties past and the promise of celebrations to come. And for the first time since this whole crazy journey started, Noah felt like they were exactly where they were supposed to be. The gala was a triumph. 300 guests filled the restored ballroom, the chandeliers sparkling overhead, the sound of laughter and conversation echoing off the walls. Mrs. Hartford had brought not just friends, but an entire contingent of wealthy donors who wrote checks with impressive zeros. The Historical Society presented Evelyn with an award for preservation efforts. Local media covered the event, praising the inn's restoration and the love story behind it. Calvin didn't show up, despite his earlier threat. The restraining order had teeth, and even he wasn't foolish enough to violate it. Noah spent the evening by Evelyn's side, watching her shine as she networked and charmed and secured the inn's future with every conversation. She wore a midnight blue dress that made her look like she belonged in old Hollywood, and every time she smiled at him across the room, Noah felt his heart do something complicated. Near the end of the night, they slipped away to the porch for a moment of quiet. Inside, the party continued without them, but out here, it was just the two of them, and the river and the stars. We did it, Evelyn said, leaning against the railing. The inn's going to survive. More than survive. You raised $140,000 tonight. That's enough for repairs, enough to buy you breathing room with the bank, enough to make this place what it should be. What we did, Evelyn corrected, none of this would have happened without you. Noah joined her at the railing, wrapping an arm around her waist. So what happens now? We've won the court case, saved the inn, proved everyone wrong. What's next? Evelyn turned to him, and in the soft light from the ballroom windows, she looked happy, genuinely, deeply happy. Now we run this inn together, as real partners, as real spouses. She pulled a folded paper from her clutch. I had the lawyer draw up papers making you a 50-50 owner, not because I have to, but because I want to, because you earned it. Noah took the paper, recognizing the legal language, joint ownership, equal shares, no qualifications or conditions. Evelyn, I can't. You can. You are. Sign it. This is your mother's legacy. And you've helped me honor that legacy. You've poured your time, your money, your heart into this place. It's ours now, both of ours. Evelyn handed him a pen. Please, Noah, let me do this. Noah signed, and when he looked up, Evelyn was crying. Happy tears this time, not the desperate ones from that rainy night that felt like a lifetime ago. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For making me believe in partnership again. For showing me that asking for help isn't weakness. Evelyn kissed him softly. For marrying me. Best decision I ever made, Noah said, and meant it. 3 months later, on a Saturday morning when the inn was quiet and the river was still, Noah and Evelyn sat on the porch with their coffee. Emma was inside, reading in her window seat. The ballroom was booked solid for the next 6 months. The bank had approved a long-term refinancing plan with excellent terms. And Calvin Moore was facing his own legal troubles. Turns out filing 17 frivolous lawsuits had finally caught up with him. I was thinking, Evelyn said, breaking the comfortable silence, we should do it again. Do what again? Get married, but for real this time. With vows, we write ourselves and Emma as a witness and all the romance we skipped the first time around. Noah looked at her, this woman who'd stumbled into his life in a ruined wedding dress and turned everything upside down in the best possible way. "I'll marry you," he said, echoing the joke from what felt like another lifetime. Evelyn smiled, that bright, genuine smile he'd worked so hard to earn. "You already did." "Then I'll do it again, as many times as you want." They sat together as the sun climbed higher, planning their future and watching the river flow past. The inn stood solid behind them, no longer crumbling but restored, a testament to stubbornness and partnership and the kind of love that sneaks up on you when you're too busy fighting to notice it arriving. And when Emma came out to join them, climbing into the space between her father and his wife, Noah realized this was what he'd been missing. Not just a partner or a purpose, but a family built from the wreckage of two people who'd both given up on happy endings. They'd found one anyway, together.